Wow, sometimes a headline just hits you and you're like, hold on. What? You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
That's what happened when the news came out of France about Marine Le Pen. I mean, this is a huge political figure, someone who seemed like a real contender for the French presidency in 2027. And now, boom, she's been convicted of embezzlement.
No question, this is a major turning point. All the sources we're looking at, they all point to this verdict in Paris as something that could really fundamentally change the direction of French politics.
That's a big deal. So for this deep dive, we've got a bunch of different sources,
Yeah.
news articles, a briefing document, the whole works. And we really want to get into the weeds, the nitty-gritty of this story.
Right.
And for you listening, our goal is simple. We want to give you the core information, the really important stuff, so you can understand what happened, why it's such a big deal, and what could happen next.
Exactly.
Without getting bogged down in every single detail.
Yeah, and it's interesting how consistent the main points are across all these different sources, all pointing to this conviction and what it means right now for French politics.
Okay, so let's break down the verdict itself. What exactly did the court find Marine Le Pen guilty of?
Well, at the core of it all is the misuse of EU funds.
Yes.
The court found that Le Pen and other people from her party, the National Rally, they used to be called the National Front, by the way, they basically used over 4 million euros from the EU Parliament to pay their staff in France. This happened over quite a while, actually, from 2004 to 2016.
12 years. It's a long time and a lot of money. And the judge didn't mince words, did she?
Not at all. The judge, Bénédicte de Persuis, she described Le Pen as, and I quote, at the heart of a system that the party used to take this EU money. She called it, get this, a democratic bypass, saying that it deceived both the parliament and the voters.
Wow.
So they're not seeing this as just some minor administrative slip-up. They're saying this was a deliberate plan to basically use European money to cover the party's expenses in France.
That's serious.
Huh?
And the sentence itself is a big deal, too. It's not just a slap on the wrist. This really hits her political future hard.
Oh, absolutely. The biggest part of the sentence is that she's banned from holding any public office for 5 years. And this is huge because Le Pen was considered a top contender, maybe even the front runner, for the 2027 presidential election.
Yeah.
So this ban really throws a wrench in those plans. Le Pen herself even said before that being barred from running would be like a political death sentence. And the court was very clear that because of the nature of her crimes, she had to be banned from office immediately.
So for someone who has been such a force in French politics for such a long time, this really pushes her to the sidelines, at least for now. What else was part of the sentence?
Well, on top of the ban, she also got a 4-year prison sentence. But 2 of those years are suspended, and the other 2 would be under house arrest.
House arrest.
But here's the important thing. This part of the sentence is on hold while she appeals. She was also fined €100,000, and her party, the National Rally, has to pay a hefty $2 million fine.
So even though she might not go to jail right away because of the appeal, the ban on running for office is in effect right now. That's a huge blow. The reports also talk about her reaction in court. It doesn't sound like she took it well.
No, not at all. Apparently, as the verdict was being read, she got more and more agitated. She was shaking her head. And at one point, she even whispered, "Incredible." And then before they even finished announcing the whole sentence, she just grabbed her stuff and walked out of the courtroom.
Just like that.
Yeah, it sounds like it caused quite a scene.
A dramatic exit,
A lot.
to say the least. So we've got the verdict, the immediate fallout.
Uh-huh.
But this is about more than just one person, right? This has big implications for all of France.
Oh, without a doubt. This has sent shockwaves through the entire French political system. The 2027 presidential election is suddenly a lot less certain. Le Pen was a major force. She always drew a lot of support, and now she might be out of the picture.
Right.
This creates a vacuum, and it could lead to more instability and division as other people try to fill that void. What's interesting is that even some of her opponents, like this conservative lawmaker Laurent Wauquiez, they've expressed concerns about the verdict. He said it puts a very heavy weight on our democracy.
Huh.
It seems like some people are worried about the judiciary, the courts, getting too involved in politics.
That's a good point. It shows how complex this whole situation is. What about Le Pen's own party, the National Rally? What are they doing now?
Well, they've got to be scrambling. This is a huge setback for them. It could really hurt their momentum. But, and this is important, it could also fire up their core supporters. They might see this as an attack on their leader, a sign that the system is rigged against them.
Yeah, like a rallying cry. We've seen that happen before.
Exactly. And then you have Jordan Bardella, Le Pen's protege, who is now even more crucial.
He's a young guy, right?
Yeah, just 29. And he's the current president of the National Rally. He's the most likely person to take Le Pen's place if she can't run in 2027. And his reaction to the verdict was strong. He said Le Pen was unjustly condemned and that French democracy was being executed.
Wow.
So it's clear that they're not going to just accept this quietly. They're going to fight it and say it's politically motivated.
So they're pushing back hard. Let's talk about Le Pen's defense. How are they responding to all of this?
All along, Le Pen and the other party officials have said they're innocent, they didn't do anything wrong. She's called it a witch hunt, which definitely resonates with some people. And during the trial, she made this really interesting argument. She said that if they stop her from running, it would basically disenfranchise all the millions of people who voted for her. Like, they're taking away their choice.
That's a powerful argument.
Yeah, and her lawyer said the same thing after the verdict. He called it extremely scandalous and said they're definitely appealing.
But the ban is still in place during the appeal, right?
That's right.
So they're saying this is a political move, an attack meant to undermine the voters who support Le Pen. And this isn't just a French issue, is it? There are international reactions, too.
You got it. This has become a global story. Other far-right leaders in Europe are speaking out in support of Le Pen. Viktor Orban, the Hungarian prime minister, he posted, "Je suis marine," I am marine, on social media.
Wow.
Matteo Salvini in Italy, he condemned the ruling as well. And even the Kremlin got involved, saying that Europe is trampling on democratic norms, framing it as a politically motivated action against Le Pen.
So there's the idea building that this is the courts overstepping their boundaries, interfering in politics.
Exactly. Some far-right leaders are worried about what they see as democratic backsliding, where the judiciary is getting too involved in the political process. This shows that this case has much bigger implications. It's not just about France.
Right. It's touching on some really fundamental ideas about democracy. And it's important to remember that this isn't the first time something like this has happened in French politics. The sources talk about other financial scandals involving high-profile politicians.
That's right. Le Pen's conviction is part of a bigger pattern. They specifically mention former President Nicolas Sarkozy, who's had a lot of legal trouble, convictions related to financial misconduct. So while Le Pen's situation is definitely politically charged, it's also part of this trend where there's more scrutiny on how politicians handle money.
Interesting.
And this has sparked a debate in France about where the line is between the courts and politics. There's also the French Constitutional Council. They're supposed to make a decision soon about whether it's legal to immediately ban elected officials from running for office.
So there could be even more developments down the line. And just to clarify, even though she's been convicted and can't run for office again, Le Pen is still a member of the National Assembly, right?
Yep, that's correct. The ban only applies to future elections. So for now, she's still in the National Assembly. But the sources point out that if President Macron decides to dissolve Parliament and call for new elections, Le Pen wouldn't be allowed to run in those.
Okay, so this is still a very fluid situation. Now, let's bring it back to you, the listener. Why should you care about all of this happening in France?
Well, this could have a big impact on French politics, and what happens in France affects the entire EU. And of course, the EU is a major player on the world stage.
Sure.
But it goes deeper than that. This case raises some really important questions about the role of the courts in a democracy. How much power should they have? And it's about holding politicians accountable for their actions. These are issues that matter in any democracy.
Absolutely.
It also shows us what happens when populist movements, like the one Le Pen leads, when their leaders run into legal trouble. How do they adapt? Who takes over? What happens to their supporters? These are all questions worth thinking about.
It's a real-life case study
Yeah.
in the complex relationship between law, politics, and public opinion.
Exactly.
So to sum it all up, the big takeaway here is that Marine Le Pen's conviction for embezzlement and this 5-year ban from holding office, this is a major shakeup in French politics. It sidelines a key figure who could have been the next president, and it creates a lot of uncertainty about the future of the far right in France.
And it really makes us think about these bigger questions about democracy and how it works.
For sure. So here's something to consider as we wrap up. How might this conviction change the 2027 election in France? What does it tell us about the balance between holding people accountable and making sure the democratic process is fair? And what about all the people who have supported Le Pen all these years? Where do they go from here? What happens to French politics without her on the ballot? These are the questions we'll be watching in the coming months and years.
It'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds.
Absolutely.